Good evening and welcome to the Ways and Means Committee for today, which is Tuesday, July 27th. I am the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Councilwoman Adkins is also vice president of the Gary Common Council. The agenda for today, we do not have any ordinances per se to review, but we did want to host a community review to give the public insight as to the details related to the American Rescue Plan Act. And just give it a caveat before we start. This information is just to get us aligned in terms of what the uses of those funds are. And as we move forward with the planning in collaboration between the legislative branch as well as the executive branch, we will hold more public hearings and additional engagement sessions with the community where we will have more detailed discussions. Joining me this evening are the following council members, my council members at large: Councilman Ron Brewer, Councilman Mike Brown, council representatives from the following districts: Councilwoman Linda Barnes Caldwell of the 5th District, Councilwoman Mary Brown from the 3rd District, Councilman Dwight Williams from the 6th District, and Councilman at large, Councilman Gloria Slay. We also have our council attorney here. I thought that our financial advisor will be here, but I don't see him as of yet. And of course, we have members from the executive branch joining us: our controller, Mr. Malik Harper, Deputy Mayor Trent McCain, as well as Ms. Arlene Colvin, who wears many hats, I would say, but I think her current capacity is Executive Director of Community Development. Also, for the record, would like to state joining us is our president, representative for the 1st District, William Godwin. So the way that the information will be displayed, we have a PowerPoint presentation that we will be going through. I will entertain questions or comments from my colleagues during the review of the presentation. I would also entertain questions or comments during the presentation from the executive branch members. Public comment will be reserved for the end of the presentation. So at this time, I will share my screen. Can someone confirm you guys can see this okay? All right, so welcome. This is the community review for information for the public related to a high-level overview for the American Rescue Plan Act. So for the agenda today, we're going to discuss the following: just the overview in terms of the details from a federal level. We also will go into a discussion related to the funding that was available to the city of Gary. We will discuss the guidelines and parameters related for usage of those funds and the restrictions related to usage of those funds. Next, we will go into just establishing what the goals will be in terms of alignment for both the executive branch as well as the legislative branch as we work together to adhere to the goals of utilizing these funds to progress the city of Gary. And then lastly, we will discuss the next steps related from a community engagement perspective. So as we know, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which was officially passed in March of this year, which was signed by our president, President Biden, March 11th. It consisted of $1.9 trillion in COVID pandemic relief that was distributed in various different ways. As it relates to state as well as local government entities, $350 billion was allocated across these particular entities for financial assistance. There was discussion in terms of how the allocation in terms of funds was determined, and it was determined utilizing CDBG fund formula, which is the Community Development Block Grant formula. And so that is how the assessment in terms of the total number of allocation in terms of dollars that was assessed both at the state and local government was contributed to from a formula standpoint. The local funding is which most of us have been hearing a lot about as it was presented in the public via distribution from our congressman, as well as the executive branch had put out a number of public relations communications related to our receipt of the funds. And just so for clarity, Gary, Indiana received a total of about $80.345 million. So far, we have received half of the allocation. We received that money in May of this year. The balance will be received next year, May 2022, excuse me. And so just some key things for us to keep in mind as it relates to the uses of the funds from an allocation standpoint. We have over 3 years to spend the funds. However, we do have to create a plan for usage of those funds before appropriations can take place. Also, it states here that the funds was released in 2 separate transactions, which will help from a accountability standpoint and a county measure standpoint. We should talk about financial controls and local accountability, which is key. So the way that we will ensure that we have local accountability and adhere to the measures that was set by the State Board of Accounts of the state of Indiana, we were instructed to create a separate fund, which the fund number, which was approved by the council by ordinance earlier this year, is Fund 176. As it relates to accountability, within a document that is called the Final Rule, which was created by the U.S. Treasury Department, there is requirements for us to submit detailed accounting and periodic reporting to the U.S. Treasury Department. And that reporting will discuss how we use, how we allocate it, and any expenditures, if you will, that come out of the fund. The performance period, meaning that the time frame that we have to utilize all funds, runs until December 31st, 2026. So it is key that from a leadership perspective, my colleagues, as well as elected officials on, I guess, our mayor, as we are thinking about the plan for the city, we have to keep in mind that this plan and use of these funds might, in fact, run past our terms. And so this is a good opportunity for us to do something extremely positive to set the city of Gary to the next level from a progression standpoint. And so I want the public to know that we are taking that serious, and we are definitely working together to ensure that the plan that we enact is the right one to help the city from a continuity standpoint and longevity standpoint. The funding parameters. So what can these funds be used for? This is the big caveat, the big discussion that has been going around the city. So I know a lot of people have ideas, but there are parameters that have been set by the Treasury Department in terms of how we could use these funds. And so you will hear moving forward us refer to these categories as buckets. And so that is the terminology when we say the buckets, the 4 buckets. They are the 4 buckets, in fact, that was identified by the U.S. Treasury Department in terms of category of usage for the funds. And so the first one is public health and economic impacts. The second one is replace revenue loss due to COVID-19. Next, we have provide premium pay to eligible essential workers. And the last is we will invest, you have an opportunity to invest in water, sewer, stormwater, and broadband infrastructure. And so for short, usually once you hear discussions, if they talk about infrastructure, that is the type of infrastructure that we are limited to do within that bucket. It is not roads. It's not anything that's outside of the scope of those 3 particular specific areas of interest. I also just wanted to point to the public that the programs that you enact in any of the 4 buckets, they must show how they respond to the negative impacts of COVID-19. So recall in our opening when we talked about the establishment of the ARPA fund, it in fact was to deal with a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so therefore, anything, and as we go forward in this presentation, we will show examples as to certain examples that you can do that will address the impacts from a negative standpoint for these particular bucket category usage. And then also just wanted to note for the second one that is listed here, when we talk about revenue losses, that is specific to general revenue shortfalls that are general revenue streams for the city only. So for example, if we anticipated an increase in taxes that had not hit, we cannot include that. If there was any additional increases in utilities, I don't think our city qualifies for that, but some municipalities do, we cannot include that. So I wanted to go and give you guys some examples within each so-called bucket. So for public health and economic impact, As I stated before, the program and or service that we do create to address and concerns with it must respond to the impact of COVID-19 and the public health crisis. And so some examples that was set forth within the interim rule that was given to us as a directive from the U.S. Treasury Department as to how more details in terms of how or programs that you can do within these buckets. These are just some examples. And again, this is not limited to this list. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just examples to get us to start thinking. So I'll read some of them. And so the purchase of PPE, public communication efforts. So if we wanted to implement a different system to ensure that we were getting out communications to the public, as you all remember, when the COVID pandemic first happened, we were confused into how do we align the community in terms of how we move forward, if we mandated masks or not, et cetera. And so you have an ability to invest in that type of service, if you will, within this particular bucket. Ventilation improvements, and so specifically ventilation improvements to public facilities, capital investments to public facilities to meet pandemic operational needs, support for mental health effects due to COVID impact, again, touching based on the public health side of this particular bucket, job training programs. So the economic impact side of this particular bucket hits businesses that might have been impacted. It hits, I think, tourism that might have been impacted. If we had a tourism industry within our particular city, we could do grant programs or any type of loan programs, if you will. I believe there's no stipulation related to that to support onboarding those particular entities back to standards pre-COVID. And some additional things, we could, enhance chambers or enhance any type of public entity that we have, if it's the public safety facility, to accommodate hybrid in-person or virtual meetings. Again, address services to homelessness. We can do affordable housing development, which is a big one, and then nonprofit support. So not only do we have the flexibility of doing something to support small businesses, but also supporting as it relates within a loan or grant type of program for nonprofits that might have been hit through the pandemic. And again, that's not an exhaustive list. That report on the U.S. Treasury side goes into thorough more detail. The other buckets, replacement of general loss revenues, I think that one is kind of straightforward. So the details related to that is that the funds can be used to offset any budget shortfall that is predicted over the next 3 years through 2024. So there is within that particular rule a formula that could be used to understand what that revenue shortfall looks like for the city of Gary. I know for a fact that on the executive branch side, the team, the finance team, our controller has been working hard to get those numbers together. And then I will do a caveat. That is the area where we have the most flexibility. So once we identify what that shortfall is, there is limited direction in terms of what that money could be used for. So we could cut ourselves a check for whatever our projected lost revenue is that was projected through 2024. And then, of course, once that hits our general fund, we should be able to utilize that to service other needs within the city. The next bucket was to provide premium pay for eligible essential workers. And so the funds could be used to provide premium pay to eligible performing essential work during the COVID-19 health emergency. So within the final rule, it explicitly states what type of profession certifies as an essential worker. And so again, I know that the executive branch team has become well versed, and I didn't list all of those, but it's kind of health workers, our public safety facility workers, of course, our police department, our fire department, of course. I think even our workers who might have been working in the public safety building during that time will qualify. And there's other identifiable professions listed within the final rule as well. And then the last bucket was the infrastructure one. So of course, the detail was invest in water, sewer, stormwater, or broadband infrastructure. And so projects that can improve access to clean drinking water, that can improve wastewater, that also can improve stormwater infrastructure qualify. In addition to those three, also what you can use the funds for within this bucket is any infrastructure related to improving the broadband experience within underrepresented areas, which of course the city of Gary qualifies as an underrepresented area. So some examples in terms of what does that even look like, right? Is we could replace the lead service lines within the city if there are any. We could use funding to create a stormwater master plan. We could manage or treat stormwater issues that the city might have. And again, this will require us partnering with our sanitary district as well to understand where those opportunities are. And of course, green infrastructure projects, which I'm sure Ms. Brenda Scott Henry will be happy to hear that. And again, I'm not going to read them all, but as it relates to the broadband, it's specifically stated that any underrepresented area that had less than 100 megabytes per second in terms of the speed of internet, their particular municipalities could invest in infrastructure to increase that. And what that hits on is, as you all know, during the pandemic, we moved to a virtual world. Not only from a professional standpoint, a lot of people were working from home, but also our students were as well. And so the federal government saw that there was a need, especially in rural areas, as well as underrepresented areas as well, that are low income, to have that accessibility. And as you know, I think we could talk to our colleagues on the public school system side to know that our students are struggling because of their lack of accessibility, their lack of, I think there were some struggles in the beginning in terms of them having that. And so there's an opportunity for us to also invest. Restrictions. And so these are some of the key restrictions that have been stated, again, by the U.S. Treasury Department. So pension fund payments, we cannot use ARPA for that. We cannot use the funds associated with an ARPA to pay off any debt. We cannot pay any past legal obligations that the city might have. We cannot create a rainy day fund, or any type of reserves from a financial standpoint with the money. And lastly, this is a little funky. I added this one, but general projects outside of the scope of the 4 buckets, you really have to be careful for that, because the only flexibility that you have is within that bucket related to the general revenue payback, if you will. And so, as I stated earlier, whatever is the alternate number that we see that we had the revenue shortfall through 2024, of course, when that money is going back into the general fund, then you could use it for a number of flexible things. But you can't, it's a 2-step, right? It's not direct from, because there's no bucket for that. So it is key that we also understand that multiple entities that we are connected to also got funding. So the state of Indiana, in addition to us getting our local funds, the state also received funds. They received about $3 billion worth of funds. Gary Community School Corporation received $46.8 million. Our Lake County government received approximately $94.2 million. And so that was worthy to note, because as we're thinking about the projects that we want to invest, we want to ensure that we are creating alignment with these other entities. I just mentioned about the broadband connection and infrastructure. Well, that is also something that Gary Community School Corporation can also invest in. And so we want to be strategic in our plan. And I know that Lake County government has also invested in the rental assistance program, which is something that the funds within the first bucket that I discussed, affordable housing, rental assistance, is something that could have been used for that. We want to ensure that we are leveraging whatever programs that they have, and also being very intentional with our plan moving forward. And so I thought it was good for us to understand what other communities are doing. Now, I would say this, issues related to Gary, the status related to Gary is unique to Gary. And so we know that we are making a plan unique for the climate and culture of our needs, but it's important for us to benchmark just to get us thinking, because another entity might have thought of something that we didn't think of, right? And so this is to kind of stimulate a thought process. And so some of the leading area of focus, what I was able to do was we were able to look at a number of entities from municipalities. So from Flint, Michigan, Detroit, Chicago, we benchmarked with Alexandria, Virginia, we benchmarked with Atlanta, Georgia. And this is some of the highlights in terms of the area of focus that they are utilizing the funds for. So fighting generational poverty, restoring neighborhoods, parks, recreation, and cultural facilities. And let me be clear about that again. You cannot use money from a direct bucket from that. You have to utilize it after that funding is received from bucket, I'm gonna say 3 or 2, I think it was, which is the bucket that we are cutting the check for the projected revenue losses. And then there's flexibility with the uses of that money. And so that is how some entities are utilizing funding to do parks and recreations. Improving the public safety facilities, which we already spoke about, reducing the digital divide, which is the infrastructure, investing in broadband infrastructure, small business assistance, which hits that first bucket, public health and economic impact. And also, this was something that I kind of alluded to in the previous slide. One particular entity created a county-city partnership opportunity that focused on entrepreneurship and technical assistance program. And so, again, that is a prime example of us collaborating with these other entities who have also received a substantial amount of funding to provide a more well-versed program to our citizens. And so the goal for the city of Gary, and I believe my counterparts on the executive branch will all agree to this. We know that the plan will be a multi-year effort. We talked about that, right? So we have until the end of 2026 to actually fully use the funds. However, the long-term goal will be to have the efforts that we work on together, create self-sustaining programs that will be long-lasting and a long-lasting benefit to the citizens of the city of Gary. So again, in the beginning of this particular program, I stated that this particular opportunity will last way past our terms. And so we should remember that as we work together to create the comprehensive plan for the city. So again, I did tell in the beginning, this is a first step. This was just to get a start on our community engagement and also to make sure that the community understood the uses or definitions of the use of the funds and how we could actually utilize those correctly. Because there was misconceptions and conversations throughout the community in terms of what we can do with this money. So we've worked together to identify what we feel the next steps from a community engagement plan should be. We identify, and this has already been done, identified and secured city resources needed to implement this plan. And so the executive branch had already been working on that. And of course, this committee on the council side had also been working on that. And we are communicating with each other, identifying the stakeholders, the partners to engage in the effort. And so again, these two, these are in parallel and we're moving within these particular actions. The initial ARPA fund review, which was led by the Gary Common Council, which is happening now. Our mayor will soon be launching his mayor town halls, which will be open to the public. And I don't want to overspeak, but I do believe the intent there is to get out in the community across the full city, in every district, to have engaging conversations about these ideas, et cetera. And then also, for us to be able to present the current status and what the team is thinking from the city standpoint in terms of the use of the funds. And so that particular schedule will be coming in the pipeline very soon. However, we also wanted to start now to engage the community more directly, aside from this particular review. And so the council has created 2 different ways for us to obtain community input. So starting tomorrow, we have established an email address, which is ARPA, A-R-P as in Paul, A, input@gary.gov. So you could submit comments directly to that email address that will go to the Gary Common Council as to what ideas you have related to uses of these funds. And we will receive that and be able to present a comprehensive summary to all colleagues to interpret and then have an open discussion with our leadership on the city side as well. The second way that you could submit feedback to the Gary Common Council for review is from August the 1st to August the 15th. We will have a survey on our Gary Common Council website where you could go and input direct feedback for us to review as well. And so that website, it is garycommoncouncil.org. So I'm gonna repeat it because it's not a gary.gov website, it's a garycommoncouncil.org. And of course, you can get to our website utilizing our main gary.gov website as well. And again, just to repeat, that survey will go live August the 1st and it will end August the 15th. Lastly, once we have compiled all the information, worked together internally with the executive branch to devise the plan, we will have another follow-up Gary public meeting. Again, where we will be able to present what the plan looks like, and we will engage directly with our stakeholders related to that as we prepare for that later on down the line. And lastly, the action plan. And so after we verbally communicate the plan, we will have that plan written in the form of an ordinance that the council will have to accept and adopt prior to expenditures being assessed for any programmings that are identified in this plan. And so we will be sure to keep the public engaged and well versed in terms of when that is happening and when you could participate in that particular public meeting. So that is all that I had. It is short and simple, but it is, vital information so the community could be aligned in terms of what ARPA is, how much did we get, how could we use the funds, and what we cannot use it on. And so at this time, if there's any colleagues that have any questions.
A+ job. The only thing that I would like to point out is that the numbers have changed ever so slightly. Malik, our city controller, is on the line, and he may be able to give you the exact amount. But when this was first announced, it was around $83.6 million or thereabouts. And when it was finally distributed to us, it was around 80.2 million. So that amount is, oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, I think I must have saw an earlier draft.
Mm-hmm. So, right. Of course, Ms. Arlene Coleman got me together, and she reached out to me and gave me that update. And so I made sure that we put the correct number in here.
Well, yes, and that number is correct.
Well, thank you very much. I withdraw my statement. No further questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Harper, do you have anything to add?
No, I do not. As Deputy Mayor McCain had mentioned, everything about this presentation was great. So I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay, I do have one question for and I should have got this prior to, but do we have a timeline in terms of when we could expect Mayor to list the schedule for those town halls?
We do plan on scheduling those for the month of August, but as far as when we were going to be scheduling the first one, we don't have that nailed down just yet. Okay. And then we're going to have to consider how we cover the entire city between the next 6 weeks or so. So as soon as those dates have been finalized, we'll get them out. We'll make an announcement at the council meeting during the administration's report, as well as all through our other media channels, such as social media and traditional media.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any comments, any discussion?
Wow. Madam Chair.
Councilman Godwin.
Well, first, I want to thank you and echo Attorney McCain's sentiment that you've done a fabulous job throughout this process and keeping us informed. And I think this is going to be very helpful, providing a very good roadmap. I do want us to encourage urgency in this process. I've been very, frank in our smaller group, non-quorum, about the need to do something very aggressively for public safety, police and fire especially. Many of them caught COVID, and so there was a direct impact on them. We also know that we have larger issues in terms of staffing, and therefore our readiness for any future issues, pandemic, what have you, is threatened when we look at our numbers both in the police and fire department. So I'm a big advocate for a good portion of these dollars, being used for the hazard pay for those workers, including general services, who did not get a break, who did not work from home. So that is going to be something I know I want to push very big. Thank you.
Thank you, President Godwin.
Madam Chair,
Councilman Williams?
my sentiment exact with Godwin, and you did a great patient. I have one other concern. I think a lot of the residents in my district were really concerned about these dollars going towards the repair of the infrastructure of the roads in the city. So we'll be looking at the infrastructure plan from our President Biden for that project for our streets.
Sure. So I can try to speak a little bit about it. I might try to tap into the colleagues on the other side too. But what I do know is from what I've gathered, the ARPA funds will not be the right way to do that. However, upcoming, I'm not sure where we are from a federal standpoint in terms of the approval of the American Jobs Plan. But the language from a draft perspective, it does allocate a substantial amount of funding that could be used for roads, infrastructure, as well as demolition, if they allocate appropriately the money that has potentially been placed as a draft right now in that particular act. And so it's two different acts, sort of like the different structure that we had within the CARES Act versus the ARPA, act, if you will. Well, that's kind of redundant, but ARPA versus CARES. And so as we look for more information related to the American Jobs Act, that is where we will have the opportunity the most to see what funding we could get once it is approved for infrastructure outside of that. Now, I want to be transparent, as we stated, that the revenue bucket, there's flexibility within that, but I'm not sure how much we will be able to do related to roles within that. So I think the best will be for our constituents to be patient with us as we hear from our federal government related to this next opportunity, and then we'll be able to give them some more definition in terms of how that funding looks.
Madam Chair, may I add something?
Yes, absolutely.
And that is, although we won't necessarily be able to use these rescue plan dollars to directly repave roads and streets and alleys, we are able to get an indirect benefit from our infrastructure bucket. For example, if we partner with the Gary Community School Corporation and Comcast and AT&T and lay fiber in the road, we're going to have to fix it. So if we do that, then we can indirectly fix our roads that way. But it has to be tied to an underlying infrastructure project, and it just can't be, let's repave this street from 15th Avenue to 25th Avenue, so forth, in a traditional way. As you pointed out quite accurately, is that once the Infrastructure Jobs Act is finalized and President Biden signs it into law, then we will learn what other projects that we can use. And this is right in the sweet spot of road repair, because I think if I have this number correctly, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but the city of Gary has about 400 square miles of roads that it is responsible for, notwithstanding the county and the state. So it is a huge issue, but we won't be able to accomplish all of our desires with this rescue plan dollar.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mayor.
So creativity.
Madam
help
Chair.
us get something after that. Councilman Brown?
Good evening. Once again, I want to congratulate you again on a great presentation. And I would also like that if we could get that in an email form so we can be able to use that moving forward to re-educate ourselves and remind ourselves as council persons what we need to do. But as you know, the numbers are going up because of the unvaccinated. So to me, it seems there should be a sense of urgency as to how we can get these funds specifically for our first responders and people, like you said, general service and others who are not going to be able to take a break. And so that's one of the charges I have a concern about. I think what you're doing and what the administration is doing, with us working together as a council, I think that's great. But I also think it's important for us to make sure that we prepare as quickly as possible because the numbers are not going down. We have to be prepared. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Brown. And so just to your point, Councilman, the first point, all council members did receive this presentation. I think I emailed it around 4 or 4:30 today. So it should be in your email.
Okay.
Councilwoman Brown?
Did you say we all received it?
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't know where mine is. I don't know. I'm not saying I didn't receive it. I don't have it.
Okay.
But I do know there are several things that were in the presentation that I think are extremely important. I went a couple of weeks ago over on 21st and Grant, where they are doing a sewer project. And I'm making an assumption that that sewer project was a part of this. There are a lot of problems with sewer issues in our city, water and sewer, and I did see that. But I don't, I'm sorry, Madam President, but I don't have the information. I would like to have it emailed to me again as well.
No problem, Councilwoman. I got you.
Thank you. But there are some things in there that we know need to be done. They have to be done. We get a lot of calls as council members from our colleagues who are complaining when there's a lot of rain about the sewers and what, if anything, are we, or can the sanitary district do about, the water standing in the streets? So if I can get a copy of that, I'd be very appreciative.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem, Councilwoman. Any
Madam
other
Chair,
colleagues? Yes.
I just would like to respond to Councilwoman Brown.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The current GSD sewer project that is ongoing in the area that she described, it is not something that has been initiated through ARPA because we have to have this money appropriated by the council before any dollar is spent. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood, and all of our listening audience, that no dollars have been appropriated from the ARPA funds at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Councilman Brewer?
speaking of projects and things of that nature, have the administration pinpointed different projects as high priority that they can share at this time with the council? Projects, the reimbursement that you receive, have you all got it final down to a number, what that number would look like?
Yes, Councilman Brewer, we do have a number. I hesitate to announce that number just yet, even though I have checked with our financial advisors more than once on this number. We're going to make a formal announcement once he certifies that this is the number that we're going to be asking for. The formula has been set. He's made a couple of adjustments with it, and we do have a number. I can say this, it is an 8-figure number, but if you could please indulge me to let me leave it at that for now, because I don't want to announce something and then it's shaved off by $500,000 or $1 million, and then I have some disappointed constituents. So I don't want to do that at this time. to answer your other question about programs, the team has been hard at work for the past several months since March, working on a number of programs that we will be proposing to the council as part of our comprehensive plan. We also are going to be using a consultant from the Knight Foundation to help us finalize and polish up our plan even better. And we will present that to the council as well. So it's premature for us to identify those programs by name, but we have been working on it for several months now.
Okay. And far as police, fire, and public safety, have you all been discussing anything with those parties there to see what the reimbursement or the opportunity for a bonus to be put in place for doing the work of COVID and where we're still inside of COVID? What that number was like?
Absolutely, that's been a priority. In fact, we've been having several conversations with President Wolf and the FOP, as well as the fire on that number. We have yet to decide whether or not we will propose that number as a percentage of pay or a flat amount. We are trying to calculate to see where we can get the most bang for the buck and get the best reach for all of our public safety personnel, as well as our health and safety personnel as well. It's certainly one of the easier buckets to determine because we only have a certain amount of eligible employees that are categorized as essential by the federal government. And then if we have a certain amount that we start off with and divided by that number, then that will let you know what the flat rate will be. And then we're also doing a companion calculation to see if we can get more mileage out of those dollars if we did a percentage of pay versus a flat amount. We're working on that. We haven't completed the calculation for the percentages just yet, and we will present those to the parties and see if we can get some buy-in early before we present that number to the council.
One last thing, and is there any plans to bring the council in for any of these discussion? I think it would work best if we can have at least a minimum of 4 of us at the table having the discussion. I think it looks a lot better if we come together as a unified force, present it to the public, for one, talking about what the plan is instead of the administration presenting the plan and the council may be at odds against that plan. But I think it will work best if the council can be part of these discussions, because some of these questions have been asked now. We could know some of the answers to them if we was working hand in hand.
Without question.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilman Brewer. Yeah, I do want to echo that. I think it is, very beneficial and needed for us to also be at the table on the front end as well. And so if you all can get back to us on that, preferably within the next couple of days, in terms of how we could engage, what members you all will welcome to the table, that would be great.
Madam Chair?
Councilman Godwin?
Yes, and I want to follow up on that. I want to be very clear. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If I am president when an ordinance comes before us to appropriate these dollars and council members have not been part of the planning, I will not assign it to committee. So I want that to be very clear, that must happen in order for any legislation to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, President Godwin. Any other colleagues? Okay. At this time, I will open up to anyone from the public who is on that wants to have any comment at this time. If you are not a panelist, you should be able to submit a comment in the chat, and I will acknowledge that.
Council Lady Adkins, I wanted to make a comment if I could.
Well, let me acknowledge our judge, Judge Deidre Monroe. Thank you for joining us.
I join with everyone else. That was an excellent presentation. I know you stayed up past midnight several nights, but these kind of things for you are like secondhand. I'd like to say also to the administration, I am looking forward to someone contacting us. For Mr. Harper, I'm not sure whether you realize that the court lost significant dollars last year that would went into the general budget, as well as some dollars for the court. And those things will be reduced over those next 3 years just because we cannot handle as many people in the court as we have years before. So those are some things that I have the numbers, and I would be looking forward to working with you so that we can talk about those numbers of lost revenue. Also, we have some areas as it relates to tenants and people being evicted, and a program to help some of these people, educate them on what they can do. The program that I would be interested in having something like that in the court, because once eviction started again, you believe me, those people were running in, and a lot of people lost their homes and lost their apartments this year. So that is of great concern. Also, I was happy to hear Ms. Adkins say that some of the other people may receive some type of bonuses. Gary City Court did not close down. We actually closed down 2 days. We had to work with the police department. We had to work with the clerk's office all the way throughout this. And if it's another pandemic, if the pandemic calls for some other things, court can't close. So my people who were working, very few of them were able to work at home. They had to have constant contact with the public. So those are some of the concerns that I have. I would look forward to talking to the administration as the council on us being a part of this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Lady Adkins.
President Wolf or President Tillman, do either of you want to make any comments?
Good evening, President Adkins. I just want to thank everybody for recognizing the fact that there's a lot of different entities within our city that during the pandemic suffered loss of manpower, suffered loss of the services that we could provide because of manpower. The police department, I can't speak for the fire department. I'm sure Brother Tillman will be able to elaborate, but with the police department, we lost 63% of our manpower, not all at once, but throughout the pandemic for either COVID, being tested positive for COVID, or they had to be quarantined for the 2 weeks. And the fact that throughout the entire pandemic, we didn't have people abusing the sick policy and things like that. So that shows a lot that they were still out there working and still dealing with, whatever we had to deal with. Crime didn't stop, fires didn't stop, EMS runs didn't stop, none of these things stopped, as Judge Monroe stated, the court didn't stop, so sanitary district was out there, I mean, a lot of people were out there, and I'm just glad to see that this came about where we could do some things, and not only just for us, but citywide. There's a lot of things we could do for the city to try to rebound the city a little bit, but I have to agree with President Godwin and everybody else, along with Councilman Brewer, about we'd like to get something going with this. Tonight was the first night I heard about the percentage situation, so it's something new that we can. I mean, obviously we'll have to see what them options are, and we'll move forward. I'm eager, and I think that we can come to a viable conclusion to this. And I just thank all of you for taking the time and recognizing everybody who works in the city, us, the fire, sanitary district, the courts, and everybody. So thank you.
Of course, no, thank you. Thank you for your service for our city. President Tillman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just really want to echo your sentiments that you have on the council and everyone else with the city, that it has been really difficult dealing with COVID during these times. We've lost some members due to disability, due to COVID related illnesses, and we still have people who are dealing with the fallout of those things. And so we don't even know how long a lot of these things are going to last. And then with this Delta variants coming through and it picking up throughout the city, we don't know how long this is going to last, how long we have to deal with these different issues. We're down to around 135 members right now in the fire department, which is something that a place that we haven't been in years. And I know police has been out there doing their thing. Different people with the health department have as well. And so the urgency is there to put in the work to collectively come together to work on a plan that is going to benefit everybody who are that are working for the city and the people who the citizens here in the city, because we don't want to lose any more of these good members that we have in the city. So we just appreciate you voicing that you are concerned about what's going on with public safety, and we're willing to work together with you all. So
Thank you so much. Thank you for your service as well. You know, of course, we are definitely advocating on behalf of both entities, so we appreciate you both being here. I will acknowledge other members of the public at this time. Mr. George, are you ready?
Yes, Councilwoman. Good evening, everyone. You kind of answered a little bit of the question I had. I was going to ask about green infrastructure projects and if they could be done. Early Deputy Mayor McCain stated that there was an opportunity to possibly do some infrastructure improvements in conjunction with broadband. Is there an opportunity to make some improvements to some of our parks and green spaces by doing some green infrastructure projects as well, which green infrastructure projects can be pretty broad, but is there an opportunity to do that as well in some of our green spaces? Thank you.
Sure. So I actually think I did address that in the presentation. And so as it relates to our infrastructure standpoint, the bucket that is deemed infrastructure relates to sewer, water, stormwater, broadband infrastructure. I think I'm not missing drinking water. I think those are the ones. Now, to your point, there was a slide where I did highlight park recreation and culture, and there was a caveat related to that. And so the asterisk that was shown, I explained that denotes that we could possibly do some work as it relates to parks. However, that funding will have to come after we assess what the shortfall is from a revenue standpoint. And if after we identify what the number is, and then identify what the priorities are, that particular funding bucket could be used to do parks and recreations and green spaces, if you will. So does any other colleagues have any questions, comments, discussions? Any additional member from the public? Perfect. Yes, Councilman Brewer.
I just want to reiterate my last statement about us working together, and I know President Godwin came on with a nice statement for both sides to hear. Hopefully we won't get to that point. This is a lot of money here that's at stake, and I hate to see us come to a stalemate on both sides here because we can't come together and work on a plan for the people, not ourselves, not for the council, not for the administration, but this is for the people. That this is something that we can do to really enhance our community if we do it right and if we work together. I mean, there could be a happy medium for everyone that's sitting at the table here in all departments here. It could put a big smile on a lot of people's faces to see something at this magnitude come before our city. We have not seen it in my lifetime, I know, come before the city, but we can really make some major changes if we work together. And so I just want to reiterate that. We must sit down. We must work together. I'm willing. My colleagues are willing. Let's not get to the point where we're producing a plan and the council has not had any input. So I just want to reiterate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I agree. I don't want to gloss over that at all. I agree. Okay. I appreciate you all joining us this evening on this Tuesday, beautiful Tuesday evening. I think that we had a great discussion. It was engaging, and we look forward to more engagement with the community as well as all stakeholders that is associated as it relates to the use of these funds. I will adjourn the committee meeting at this time. Thank you.